There's a handout also that talks about kind of what I would help you, I would like you to follow if you do speak is, first of all, if you do not have to state your name or address, if I have this card I'm going to call you at. So Matthew's going to be the first one I'm going to call up. So Matthew, I'm talking to you, but I'm really talking to everybody. He's an Eagle Scout, so I can do this. He does not need to address council. You don't need to thank us for being here. You don't need to spend your time doing that. We will not be offended. We know you love us. We want you to have the time you need in that 5 minutes. Now, if you get up and you spend a lot of time with other things that have nothing to do with what we talk about, that's part of the 5 minutes. So I'm just saying, we understand y'all want to speak, and we want to give you your 5 minutes. Again, we're here to listen. If we need to respond, we will do that at our city council meeting. So with that being said, I'm going to start off with our first gentleman, Mr. Matthew Lyon. Matthew, if you would come on, stand up and jump right in with what you'd like to say, sir.
All right. Good evening. I'm, of course, Matthew Lyon. I live in the neighborhood that's adjacent to Riverside Village, and in the past few years, I've seen the baseball stadium was developed, and there's been much increasing traffic on Railroad Avenue, both roundabouts, which is one going up Riverside Boulevard and the one going up Center Street. And past few years, there was one occasion where I saw that there was traffic backed all the way up Riverside Boulevard and up to East Buena Vista Avenue, and it was so significant that people that were trying to get into their neighborhoods were walking and going backwards around the traffic circle, and that was a significant problem where people were tired of waiting and jumping the curb. So I'm concerned about the new development that's going to cause parking issues and more traffic, and it's going to deter visitors from entering Riverside Village and contributing to our economic development, and especially when there's a game day or a weekend event. So I'm aware of what it is to regulate public parking and the challenges that you have, but I'd like to see what you can proactively do to ensure that the traffic situation does not become unsustainable. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it. Mr. Randy Parks, come on down, sir, and you can feel free to jump right in. Everybody knows who you are now, if they didn't already.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank each of you for serving our community. I'm here this evening to express my support for the proposed Fourth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement. My wife and I have lived in Hammond's Ferry for almost 5 years. We enjoy living in our neighborhood and love it. We enjoy the amenities of living nearby Riverside Village. We enjoy ball games, concerts, restaurants, and shopping within walking distance of our home. Riverside Village provides North Augusta with unique opportunities and enhancements to our quality of life. Unfortunately, the economic impact of COVID shutdowns dramatically changed the business environment. As a result, the completion of Riverside Village was severely impacted. For several years now, the remaining parcels have been nothing but a bumper crop of weeds. I attended the recent Planning Commission meeting where a representative of South City Partners presented a comprehensive proposal for the completion of the remaining parcels of Riverside Village. Yes, it's different from the original design of the village. Yes, residential and retail space have replaced office space. The business climate has changed over the last several years, and developers have to adjust the scope of their project to reflect the current economic times. I found the projects of South City Partners to be impressive. The upscale mixed use of residential and retail space reflected in projects such as Amarant's in the Alpharetta City Center and Revival on Main in Kennesaw, Georgia, takes Riverside Village to the next level. Folks, I'm a realist. Parking is a concern. Increased traffic is a concern. I'm confident that with deliberate and strategic planning, these issues will be addressed. The time has come to complete the Riverside Village project. I'm asking you to work with South City Partners. They have the capital ready to invest millions of dollars in our community right now. Let's work with them to enhance the amenities of our riverfront and see this project come to fruition. I hope you will pass the Fourth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement.
Thank you, Randy. All right. Mr. Sean Sojak.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So many of you may realize that those of us who live in Hammond's Ferry started out at Ironwood Apartments while our homes were being built. Now, I know that the Planning Commission has already talked about the number of parking spaces that are in the area, and you have done studies and you've determined that this is going to work. However, I'm going to tell you the reality of what happens with those parking spaces. Right now, there are 280 units in Ironwood Apartments, but many of those units are 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. Those are sublet because people can't afford to be in them. Sublet apartment does not have 2 parking spaces, they have 1. You know where the other people park? On the street. We saw that everybody who has lived in Ironwood Apartments, who now lives in Hammond's Ferry, watched people do that. Dozens and dozens of cars every night are parked all up and down the street that come from Ironwood. That's going to happen with the new apartments. People cannot afford them. They're going to sublet their apartments, and those people are going to park on the street. You have 180 units in the Crown Plaza. I can tell you that from my job, I have had to many times in the last year and a half to 2 years bring in outside personnel to help us do this. Very often, we have not been able to stay at Crown Plaza because it's been full. That is a significant concern, 180 rooms in just that one spot. When we talk about compromise, compromise means things going both ways. When the original plan was made for office buildings and then senior living, you had a reduced number of people who needed those parking spaces. Then we looked at the new plan, which would be for 251 apartment units, high density housing. Again, high density housing. Now you all have decided to go to 335. There's no compromise for us. There's only one way, and that's for the people, the developers who have decided to come in, and they're going to leave, and they're going to take their bags of money with them, and we're going to be stuck with the problem. I found it interesting in the paper, Jesse Elliott was quoted as saying, sometimes you have to fix problems when it happens. You can't always just plan ahead and know whether it will or will not look like. Is that the way we're going to govern? Is just pass something and see, well, maybe it might be fixed later on or maybe it won't. Once this goes in, there's no going back. We have no recourse. 2 years from now, we're going to be back in the same spot. And those of us who are in Hammond's Ferry who can't have friends over, we can't have family over because parking spaces are going to be taken up by the people who are in 335 additional high-density housing units in that area. We're just simply asking for the compromise of going back to 251. 251 allows for enough parking spaces, not 19 left over. That's what was in the paper. 19 additional parking spaces are left over. That's way too few because the reality is these apartments are going to be sublet. There are going to be many more people in these apartments than what you all are counting on right now because all of us who lived at Ironwood know exactly how it happens. I'm asking you as you vote, pretend like this is your neighborhood. Pretend like this is happening in where you live. Would you want this to happen? Or would you ask your city council people to please compromise back to 251 where we all thought it was going to be when we built there? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I do want to acknowledge for the record, we do have in council, Kelly, if you don't mind handing that. I do have here let me see how many there are. 2, yeah. 2 pages of signed petition from, I'm assuming, I know a lot of these people, Hammond's Ferry folks who are opposing the apartment. So that is in the record. We'll give that to Jamie afterwards. Yeah. I didn't forget. That's good. Okay. Is there anyone else at this time that would like to, like I said, you don't have a card, that's okay. You don't have to have one. If you'd like to speak here at the public hearing, this is your opportunity. Come on down. I would just ask that. All right, come on down. And Bradley, maybe your card. Yeah. That's right. Thank you. Okay. This is Brian Brittenham, and now he doesn't have to tell us anything. He can jump right in what he wants to share with us.
Well, thank y'all all for being here. I am in support of this, and mainly for the reasons the other gentleman mentioned. It's time to get this project going. I have sat here and watched this development. It's taken way too long. It's been missed deadline after missed deadline, and it's time. If we got somebody that's willing to invest and willing to make this thing happen, you have to understand they're not willing to invest in offices right now. We can't even fill offices right up the street at MedAc, hardly. I know those just got filled, but I mean, it's a different time after COVID. Lots of offices or jobs are being done from home. And like right now, people need a place to live. That's more important. So that's what somebody's willing to put into the community or put into the area. That's what we need to get behind, because Riverside Village is just empty lots with tumbleweeds in it right now is just unacceptable for the amount of effort and energy and money that people for almost a decade now have been putting into this, and the energy. And I've personally put into the area. And I've given a lot of my last 8 years to see this, and had promise after promise, and been shown pictures and drawings time after time, and all just kind of go by the wayside, or they go, well, we kicked the can down the road a little bit further. I mean, y'all, I know that dock is going in, and I'm so grateful. But man, how long did that take? You know what I mean? It just, everything takes way longer than it needs to, and it just seems like we should be able to come together. And I'm not opposed to what the other gentleman said about the number of. I don't care how many units it is. We just need action. That's what I'm gonna ask y'all to do: is take some action and let's get moving. I don't care if it's 251 units or however many. I just don't. I mean, I can tell you this: parking is a problem down there. It's always going to be. But you know what? There's smart people. We'll figure it out. There's parking decks that aren't getting used hardly at all right now. I can tell you, it's packed and there's cars everywhere, and the parking lot or the parking deck can be. There's hardly anybody there. We've got to find a way to condition. I mentioned this the other night. I believe it was Councilman Buck. We got to do something to get people conditioned to use the parking decks. And one thing I proposed is, why don't we make the parking decks free for whatever amount of time? Just totally free. 3 months, 6 months, something. Just to condition them to getting used to using those parking decks. Maybe that would help. I don't know, just a suggestion. I'm trying to be a problem solver here, not rock the boat or anything. But I do appreciate y'all's time, and I'd like to see some progress made at Riverside Village.
Diane LaRue, 608 Railroad Avenue, North Augusta. Most of you will remember me when we started talking about Project Jackson. I came to every single meeting, every TIF meeting, every meeting speaking on behalf of Riverside Village. So I do want to see Riverside Village flourish. But you may also recall that at the first Mayor's Power Hour, my concern was the traffic at Riverside Village and the parking. And I hear people saying, we'll deal with that later. But I think we see what happened when we deal with it later. So I'm just going to ask you to think carefully about the concerns of the people, because they're real concerns when it comes to the parking issue. Not only parking there, but just the pedestrian crossings. I have to actually halt people to let us walk past there. We don't have cones indicating that. So a daily observance of the area when it comes to traffic may help in negotiation on how we go forward.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Who else?
Good evening. I'm Amy Schoenbaum. I live at 1010 Westo Street in Hammonds Ferry. And I sent you all an email earlier this week with a list of a ton of things that I would love to see done. Yep. And I want to thank the vast majority of you that responded to me. That just made me feel great, like my city council people were listening and that I was heard. So thanks for taking the time for doing that. A lot of what I would mention has already been mentioned, but what I would like you to do tonight is not vote yes and not vote no. I'd like you to table the motion for a month. I'd like to give a little bit more time for solutions to see if it can really be solved. And let's make an educated decision. I don't think waiting one more month will change anything drastically. So a few notes that I wanted to point out. So number one, I would like to see bicycle and pedestrian safety as priorities. When you come down the hill here from where we are now, the double yellow lines are almost invisible. People often don't stay on the correct side of the street, which is why they're missing. People speed down that hill. It's a 15-mile-per-hour zone. People are going 30 miles per hour, 40 miles per hour. The pedestrian crossing lines are invisible. I'd like to see little solar lights on the ground that light up so that people know there's a crossing there. And I'd like to see the North Augusta police have a permanent presence there giving out speeding tickets, cell phone tickets, not stopping for pedestrian tickets. That's a real jewel of our neighborhood. People like to go see the alligators. They want to ride their bikes. Little kids have their bikes. And I want it to be safe. I would hate somebody to be hurt. Okay, next on to the parking. I think Hammonds Ferry needs to have permit parking. The public should be able to park there during the daytime hours, not overnight. But I believe it should be paid parking for people that aren't residents. So currently, you can come to visit this area. You can pay on the street, although that's not enforced. It needs to be enforced. You can pay on the street near the stadium, or you can use a parking deck. But once you get into the neighborhood, the parking's free. So lots of people don't use the parking decks because you could just go right there for free. And that doesn't seem to be addressed. So I do think the whole neighborhood should be paid parking if you don't live there. Also, people park on like both sides of Front Street. It's really only supposed to be parking on one side. The other side needs to be painted red. You can't get cars through. It's not safe for pedestrians. And I'd like to see speed bumps on Railroad and Front Street. I'd like to see stop signs at every single corner, all four-way stops in Hammonds Ferry. And over by the larder, it needs to be a four-way stop. It's a very dangerous intersection. And lastly, I would really like to see another parking deck built. Somebody said at the last meeting that when the Green Jackets are playing, that there's about 4,500 people. And my estimate is that would mean about 2,000 cars, maybe 2 or 3 people in a car. So I believe that would take up both parking decks at the bottom. And who wants to park at the top of the hill when you can park at the bottom of the hill? And once you're down there in that stadium area, you don't want to go back up the hill. So you just move into the neighborhood. So I think there's some land over by the 13th Street Bridge. That's a gravel pit area. I think there's room maybe behind the current parking deck by Brick Pond. I feel like there could be additional parking if we really wanted it. So again, I would like to see this motion not voted on tonight until we can see what can happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Who else? Come on down. Stetson Corbett's in the house. How you doing, sir? I'm well. How are you? Good. Yeah, buddy. Thank you. Jump right on in. Thank you, Stetson.
Another aspect of the parking that I would like to address is specifically to the apartments. If this thing goes forward, you're going to have people that are living in those apartments that do not have dedicated parking, meaning if we don't set aside some of those spots, particularly in the hotel parking lot, you're going to have single mothers, handicapped folks, the list could go on, possibly having to go park up at the parking deck at the top of the hill. I know I would never want to park that far away from my house and have to make it all the way back down. It's one thing to have a golf cart ride down to the Green Jackets game. It's quite another to be lugging all your groceries and going home, trying to keep up with 2 or 3 kids, cars whizzing by, that good kind of thing. If there's some way to allocate assigned parking, split that up a little bit, that would be great. Another thing that concerns me greatly is we've been at this for 7 years. Originally, the whole plan was supposed to come out of the ground at the same time. Everything was supposed to be built at one time. And now this deal, apparently, we're going to pay the contractor $1.5 million of taxpayer money to put something up that he should have built to begin with. I would urge y'all to think about that. I would ask y'all quite possibly to propose another amendment to this. The parcels that are designated to go along with this $1.5 million are all apartment buildings. We know he wants to build the apartment buildings. No problem. The ones that got left off were the condos. The second developer said pretty clearly, oh, those would be easy to build, those would be easy to throw up. I would recommend very highly that if you do move forward with this and we're able to fix the parking, and if we do have the apartment buildings, for the city's sake, make the condos go up at the same time, because what's going to happen is you're going to get the apartments built. 2 years later, we're going to come back down, and market conditions are going to have changed, and we're going to want to throw up more apartments down there. It's already too many. So get the people who are going to be vested in the community, the people who are going to be part of North Augusta long-term because they bought a condo. Get those things built first. Get an amendment in there that's included. I think it's ludicrous that we're going to pay $1.5 million more to get something that we already prepped for. Those are my feelings.
Thank you, Stetson. Appreciate it. Who we got next? Come on down. Woody, if you would just state your name and address for the record, young sir.
Woody Schuler, 422 Railroad Avenue. Thank you. I'm a new resident about a year now. I'm up and down Railroad daily, whether by foot or by car. And I learned last week that the streets in Riverside Village were built to the bare minimum for how streets are designed, I believe. That's what I learned. And when you parallel park on those, that makes them even narrower. Putting 170 units on parcel K, and I'm not sure what size parcel K is, but 170 units on parcel K, and I don't know that there's 170 residents in Hammond's Ferry Part A today. So we're going to put 170 new residents with vehicles that only can dump into Railroad. If they go out into Lafayette, they'll be in Hammond's Ferry Part A. So Railroad, and I mentioned this to Planning Commission last week, on event nights, really it's a struggle with the traffic and the streets being built to the bare minimum for street size. And parallel parking, and a lot of the residents in Ironwood are parked on the street. I see it every day. To add 170 to Railroad right there is just going to make it, not going to improve it any. So if this is a foregone conclusion, then maybe the city can think of something. Someone mentioned the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. I've yet to see anybody really go 15 miles an hour yet. And that's just going to add to those people that are speeding through Railroad. And Railroad's a narrow road as it is with the parallel parking. So the parking is an issue, but the other piece is when those parked cars start moving, the safety comes into a play. And I really think those people are going to come out of there and take a right and go through Hammond's Ferry and exit. And then Hammond's Ferry gets even narrower. It's a one-way in many spots. So it's when those parked cars start moving, and 170 new ones right there, the safety comes into play. So I don't know what the answer is to safety. If it's like the young lady said, more patrolling for people that are speeding, what it is, but we do need to slow the people down or something, because 170 right there on Railroad, a narrow stretch as it is not going to improve it any. It's going to make it a little worse. So, thank you.
Thank you, Woody. I appreciate it, sir. Who else? Going once. Okay. Anybody else want to respond to the public hearing? So just a couple things. I'll close out the public hearing just in just a second, and then we'll take just a quick break before we come back. So just so you know, a number of really great comments by everybody. Thank you for that. Some very specific questions that will be answered as soon as we get out here and start our new meeting. Okay, when we go through each of the ordinances, specific question you've asked, we will answer those and give council an opportunity to respond as well. And there will also, if you happen to think of something else, we always do a citizen comment period when we vote on every ordinance. So if you think of something, when we get ready to do the next ordinance, you'll have an opportunity to come forward and speak again. So before I close this out, is there anybody at this point that would still like to come up for a part of the public hearing? Okay, then we are going to adjourn and we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be right back with the regular city council meeting and get some stuff done for y'all. Thank y'all for being here.
Good evening. I'd like to call the City of North Augusta City Council meeting for April the 1st, 2024 to order. You are welcome to join me in prayer. Dear God, thank you for our blessings. We ask you to give us the guidance and discernment needed to make decisions for our community. Help us to listen to each other's perspective on all matters. Help us to respect the concerns from citizens as we strive to honor you in our role as elected officials. Amen. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll do our roll call from my left.
Eric Presnell.
David McGee.
Pat Carpenter.
Britton Williams.
Jennifer McCauley.
David Buck.
Kevin Toole.
Great. Item 4, approval of minutes. Are there any corrections, deletions, or additions to the regular City Council meeting minutes of March the 18th, 2024, or the study session minutes of March the 25th, 2024? Hearing none, they stand approved as distributed. Okay. Item 5, Month of the Military Child. Really excited about reading this proclamation. I'll read it from the dais. Whereas the City of North Augusta wishes to pay tribute to the resilience and courage of our military children. Over 2 million active duty, National Guard, Reserve, and children of veterans who did not make the choice to serve but live each day supporting their brave parents. And whereas from a young age, children of service members sometimes endure long separations from their parents and shoulder the burdens of service. They spend holidays and milestones apart from those they love the most or celebrate with only a short phone call or virtual chat from a faraway parent. And whereas the physical, social, and emotional well-being of children in military families is essential to their success and has a direct impact on the strength of military families serving our country. And whereas by ensuring military children are safe and supported in our schools and communities, our men and women in uniform can focus on the challenges and missions they face in the line of duty. And whereas observing the month of the military child demonstrates our support for military children who make daily sacrifices so their parents can keep our nation safe. Now, therefore, I, Britton S. Williams, Mayor of the great city of North Augusta, do hereby proclaim April 2024 as a month of the military child. Encourage all citizens of North Augusta to take time to honor our military youth and the family members who care for them. I'll tell you just a brief little story. I had the opportunity to read to Mrs. Skaggs' class at Marcy Creek. And it was a reading week, and they had different people come in and read different books for different classes. So after I read the book, children, we were talking, and the conversation came around about, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And this is probably a room of maybe 20 students. But I was amazed. There were at least 3 children whose parents were currently at Fort Eisenhower. But not only did they say they wanted to go in the military, but there were 3 other children who had no ties, but had talked about, wow, I've always wanted to go in the Army. And I just think, Mr. Colonel Clever, you can appreciate this. But just really cool that at that age saw the benefits of our military and want to do it. So military child, very important. So that's my little take for that. Okay, we are moving into new business. Now, as we get into this part of the meeting, we basically have 3 ordinances that most of you care about. The first one is revising the general development plan. And if you have, although we've had the public hearing already, we're going to always open up for public comments too. But if you came in after the public hearing, if something triggered your mind since the public hearing, you'll have that opportunity when I ask for it, when I ask you for that time. But if you have comments about the changes in the use of the parcels, parking, really anything like that will fall under this First Amendment. That would be a good time to share if you wanted to. The second ordinance is more about abandoning a road specific. So if something about that, that's when you could share there. And the final one is really about the new master development agreement and all the economic incentives, and some of that was brought up at the public hearing. So again, this is where you really would want to share your concerns about the new MDA and economic incentives and things of that nature. So the reality is, depending on which one, we're still going to let you talk about either one if it doesn't fall in that order, but I just want to kind of give you an idea of what to expect. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we do the public comment section, a little different than public hearing when we get to that point. So item 6 in the new business planning and development, ordinance number 2024-06 to approve the revised general development plan of the 195.39 plus or minus acre Hammonds Ferry planned development located on the west side of George Avenue between North Augusta Greenway and the Savannah River. Revisions related solely to Phase B of such revised general development plan. Do I have a motion to approve this ordinance on first reading?
So moved.
Ms. McCauley. All right. Carpenter, thank you. Anything you'd like to share about this, Ms. Clifford? And if there were any questions that you noticed, you and Tommy during the public hearing, this would be a great time. You can respond to that. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first, I'd like to reorient the council and our audience tonight on who's here in the room to discuss these items. So to my far left, Mr. Tom Paradise, the Planning and Development Director. Next to him is Brooks Young from South City Partners, along with his partner, John Long, who's in the first row here. To my immediate left, I have Joe Lucas, who's our staff attorney from Pope Flynn. They've been advising on the Riverside Village project from pretty much the get-go. And on my far right, past our city clerk, Jamie, is Walter Goldsmith from First Carolina Capital, who advises on a lot of the financial matters that the city embarks on to include Riverside Village. So I wanted to make sure that the council had the full gamut of expertise in the room to be able to ask questions directly to either me or any of our partners here to talk about what's before you tonight. And I know you've had the opportunity to hear a number of these things in study session and then also watch the Planning Commission proceedings and then what you have before you here today. So what I would say essentially is the next 3 items are a package deal. So it's all 3 of these would need to go together in order to fully realize what is being presented tonight for your consideration. And these are ordinances, so all 3 of these would require 2 readings. So the first one this evening and the second one being April 15th. So the first item we'll talk about here before I turn it back to council is ordinance number 2024-06, which is revising the general development plan of what's remaining in Riverside Village to be developed. And so ultimately, you're seeing some changes to the initial scope of the project that was proposed and started acting on in 2017. So notably on parcel K, what was listed as senior living apartments is now apartments. There's a slightly higher density on that lot, but not very many. Then you have parcel C, which is the parcel that's next to the stadium deck and closest to the roundabout there. That was always envisioned to be a Class A office space. We had some discussions with folks very early on, at least in my tenure, about what that would look like as far as from a tenant perspective. But post-COVID, the Class A marketplace, office space marketplace has softened considerably. We still have 14,000 square foot of office space in the clubhouse building, which has not been leased since its inception. So that gives us an indicator of how that market is going, at least relative to Riverside Village. And then you have some changes to parcels G and H, which are closest to the amphitheater. As originally envisioned, you did have a restaurant concept there at the amphitheater closest to that on parcel G, and then parcel H's, which are individual, would be more townhomes. So that has been a change, and that G and H are actually being combined into one large lot with apartments as part of the retail component. To go back to parcel C, if I may, the largest bump in residential construction here in this village is going to be at parcel C. So where you had 0 residences lined up at parcel C, what you're now going to have is a mixed-use lot where you're going to have retail on the ground floor, and then you're going to have apartments above that, and their primary parking will be in the stadium deck that's operated by the Green Jackets. Where you're going to have most of the hotel parking deck is going to be from parcel K, which is the lot closest to Hammonds Ferry and that spot there. So those are some of the changes that are enacted, and I've watch the public hearing, and then I can also tell you some of the comments that came up in a previous session. So just to remind council and our citizens, one of the questions that I got was, why aren't we putting a assisted living or a senior living complex there at Parcel K? I can tell you that I've had dialogue with two different groups that were interested in senior living here inside the city limits, and the very first time they said, hey, we're interested in doing something here in North Augusta, I try to get them right down to Parcel K and show them, hey, this is what we've envisioned all along for doing senior living. And ultimately, both of those development groups stated they had at least a minimum 4-acre requirement for what it is that they were looking to do or in that ballpark, because they really needed single-story, ground floor access for most of what they wanted to do, although there was some room above that. But ultimately, Parcel K was not favorably considered by other developers when it came to do a senior living complex. And so, in my time here as the administrator, we've not had any other developers come to the table, even when these properties went to the Forfeit Land Commission in 2020 and in 2021. I've heard some discussion about how come we could get another developer that would come in and pick these up. And we had that opportunity in 20 and 21, and no other developers came to the table at that point in time. We had no official or unofficial interest in those parcels at that Forfeit Land Commission timeframe. Luckily, those were redeemed in time. And then I'd also like to say that's important here is, we've been dealing with, Greenstone as the master developer as we went through the initial complex here in Riverside Village. But the group that we have here at the table today, even though Greenstone is still involved as the master developer, we're talking about the builders of these 4 parcels in particular with GH, C, and K is South City Partners. And we've done a fair amount of due diligence on South City through our governmental contacts in the city of Kennesaw, Georgia, and the city of Alpharetta, Georgia, through their managers, administrators, and also economic development teams. And again, we've had very good feedback on the fact that South City did what they say they were going to do, and then also that they were happy with the end product here on the tail end of the project years later upon completion. So to me, that was a good indicator that there would be a good partner to go forward with. I can talk about the economic inducements, but I'll wait to do so on the third item. But from a general development plan, I think this developer has the capability to be able to move forward. What I've heard mostly, though, this evening in the public hearing has to do with parking, traffic, and pedestrian safety. And I wouldn't disagree with any of our constituents or your constituents on how what the current level of problems are. And I would tell you that if the council moves forward on these ordinances, then the ball's in our court as staff to be able to work through some of the technical challenges associated with the village as a whole. I can tell you, just looking at it just through an early lens, there's a number of things that we can do fairly quickly that are not expensive. I mean, we ought to be going out there and probably striping, yellow curbing a number of aspects within Riverside Village. That's something that we can do. There are actions the council can take as early as this year. We can have a discussion about a towing enforcement policy within inside the village itself. You see that in larger cities. And if the council is not amenable to that, then there's potential boot options for vehicles there as well. We can take a look at some of the pedestrian safety items. I know we've been spending a great deal of time talking about pedestrian safety on Georgia Avenue. Some of the same technologies that are available there might be available here inside Riverside Village. And then taking a look at the overall parking enforcement. I think that's something we have to do in conjunction with the homeowner association within Hammond's Ferry to figure out what does right look like for them. We have to balance really two things. We've got to balance the concern of the citizens that live in Hammond's Ferry and not having a bunch of overflow parking from apartments in front of their houses all the time, because I recognize they don't want that. But at the same time, we also have to balance the right of the general public to have access to the publicly paved roadways and also to get to Beck Park and to get to the businesses that are inside Hammond's Ferry itself. So I think those are things that are going to be challenges, but not challenges that can't be overcome through some partnerships and through some vigorous dialogue with our folks in Hammond's Ferry and River Club and the neighborhoods that are surrounding Riverside Village. But ultimately, I think that what is being presented tonight or is before you as far as the ordinance is feasible and achievable. And the staff's recommendation is to move forward on this particular ordinance. And Tom, if there's anything I missed on the general development plan, if you wanted to cover that.
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Clifford's covered it pretty much in detail. The Planning Commission did recommend approval on a 4-2 vote, with one needing to abstain. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Right. Council, any particular question you would like staff to answer that was asked that you felt like you wanted a specific or you wanted to respond?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, if I could put one other thing in for either Brooks or John if they wanted to cover this, but one of the questions had to do with, why are we doing condos or townhomes? We had that in some earlier sessions, and I know you have that as an email from as well. And so, not to preempt South City, but that their business of what they do is mixed use and apartments, not townhomes, condos, and senior living. But Brooks, if you wanted to talk to about what your model looks like and why you're going with this model in this village.
Jeff, I think that's exactly right. So what we have put in front of you all today is what we believe to be a viable project. And so we are not in the condo business, and we are not in the age-restricted multifamily development business. I cannot speak to the viability of an age-restricted apartment deal here, but I can tell you that what we have put in front of you is something that is viable and that we can execute on, and that we are extremely excited to be a part of, and hopefully be able to move forward with here and create something that we're all proud of, the city and citizens alike. That's at the end of the day, we want a product that everybody's happy with and everybody's proud of. That's the goal here, and that's how we put the site plan in front of you that we have.
Any particular questions you have that you heard from staff? Yeah, I want to just respond to say that a number of the questions were very specific about parking. The reality is the parking agreement, we have passed that. I mean, that quite frankly is a done deal. Okay, that was the plan. But what I would, Brooks, if you don't mind, there was a question about Parcel K, and this keeps coming out. And you did I heard how you responded to the Planning Commission about this. But just, if you don't mind, talk about, for some reason, citizens are very concerned that Parcel K, that everyone in Parcel K is not going to have a parking space. They're going to be parking all down the street. And I think if you could explain how we have it set up, would be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just to start off with, we're building that there are no 3-bedroom units here. It's all 1 and 2 bedroom units. It's 70% 1-bedroom units, in fact. So it's a total of 410 parking spaces throughout the whole development. Typically, in a situation like this, we would build around 420 parking spaces. In our experience, that would park our project. Frankly, there would be leftover spaces. Here, between the decks and the parcels, we have 475 spaces that are allocated for our multifamily parking. We are very comfortable with those numbers. Parcel K specifically, they will be parked in the deck and the on-site parking that we have created. Each resident will have their parking tag. Denotes that you're a multifamily resident, denotes that you'll be parking in the deck or on our surface spaces that we're building. So there will not be any, they will be parking in their designated areas, deck or surface parking. We have laid out the building as well so that our main access is right there next to the parking deck, so that it is convenient. Walk out of the deck, you walk straight into the building. That's where the main access is. That's where the lobby is. And we set it up like that on purpose so that the walk could be as short as possible from the parking deck into Parcel K specifically.
Okay, good. And for I know somebody mentioned something they read in the paper. So just to let you know, if you've got really questions specifically, you want to see the parking agreement, you can pull that up online. That document is there. So if you want to look at that, and then from there, hey, you wanted to reach out for us to ask specifically about this again, or something you saw, that's there. Okay, so the parking agreement, master parking agreement, has been passed. That is online in our city website, and I don't know if the papers have actually put that out there, quite frankly. So some of your questions are very specific about that, and I think those questions can be answered from that master parking agreement, so you can understand that the spots, that the dedicated spots, and some of that. So I just wanted to kind of mention that.
I'll chime in. I was going to say that for the third one, but since we're talking about the parking and some of you guys didn't hear us during the parking agreement timeframe, we definitely hear y'all's concerns. It was our concerns too when my 9-year-old can go with me down to Riverside Village and be like, Mom, why are people parking on the sidewalks? And why are people parking in the wrong areas? It obviously shows that there was a problem already existing down there. And I think if we had already proven the model the concerns wouldn't be as high as they are, but we have not proven that model to you guys yet. And that's on us to be sure that we prove it going forward. I will share that, with the parking agreement, I do believe that the plan works based off the agreement. Everything in it, after I've come through it, meets the development needs. But just because it does meet the needs doesn't mean that we don't have to be proactive and do our part, like Mr. Clifford was saying, from wayfinding signage to trolleys on big nights to enforcement. There's a lot of things that we need to do on our part. And I know parking is a huge concern for you guys. So please just reach out to us if that is a concern to you. I have lots of notes. I've shared them with some other people, but I'm here to help if there's something that we can help with that.
Okay. So this time for citizen comments. So is there anybody that, all right, Diane, come on down. If you would, if you don't mind, since it's a new meeting, you state your name and address, please.
Diane LaRue, 608 Railroad Avenue. I'm a familiar face because I spoke on Riverside Development. I have no objection with the information from the developers. I will say, Jennifer, you spoke to that right now. I'm reticent because no action has been taken since the first time you had a power hour meeting and I spoke about the problem. I spoke about the parking in front of an electrical, massive electrical appliance there for that whole area. And we have owners of a business parking there regularly. It's still happening. People are not being ticketed. No action has been taken. So I'm very reticent about your commitment to do what needs to be done. And I don't mean to be ugly about it, but belief follows practice. Yes.
Yeah, so that's very, very valid concern. So I'm down there a good bit. Me and my wife were at dinner one night, and I saw a truck parked on the sidewalk. I saw an elderly couple have to walk around the truck. And guess what I did? I called public safety, and they came out and they got towed. So, but, and that's just me. I mean, other citizens, can, take action as well. I mean, but we're addressing these issues. I mean, it's not that we're just not going to do anything about it, but we're definitely going to have some plans.
Well, if you're addressing them, they're still not being met. Thank you.
Diane, thank you. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate it.
Hey, sir. Sean Sojak, 544 Railroad Avenue. 3 quick things.
Yep.
We have an amazing police department. We have officers that are overworked and too much is asked of them. Parking tickets is not something that they need to be addressing. If this is going to be a problem, then the council needs to allocate funding for a parking enforcement team, not expecting these gentlemen to come down every time somebody's parked up on the sidewalk. Second thing is, Brooks, I can appreciate that you are comfortable with it, but as I said before, I know what happens with apartments because I saw it in Ironwood when we were living there before we moved in. People are going to take the path of least resistance. You may say, well, we have sufficient parking spaces, but people are not going to park in those parking decks. They're certainly not going to come up here and walk all the way down. And sir, I hear your promises, but those are hollow promises because if you could have done those, why haven't you done those already down there? Why have we waited 2 years and the parking problems continue to persist? But nobody has done anything. You all are telling us that you're going to do these things now, but we haven't seen them done before. And lastly,
face me.
Lastly, the gentleman spoke about the 20 condos that were going to be built. What happens if they just leave and don't build the 20 condos, and then we're stuck? Well, there's apartment buildings. Let's put those apartments back in there. We have to have something to hold people accountable to what the promises are that they made.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate Sean. Anybody else? Citizen comments. Come on down, Woody.
Woody Schuler, 422 Railroad Avenue. And I know you said there's a parking agreement out there to look at, so forgive me, I've not looked at it, didn't know that, so I will look at that parking agreement that was approved earlier. But I heard the gentleman say they identified 400 and some odd parking spaces for all of the new, I'm looking at you, Mayor, but
You can, yeah.
but I think he said there were 400 and some odd spaces identified for the entire. Now, does that include all 3 garages, parking decks, or just the 2 decks down in Riverside Village?
That's the overflow, everything. Tommy, you want to?
Includes
respond to
MEDAC?
that?
Yes, that includes the MEDAC deck.
That includes MEDAC parking garage.
MEDAC.
Okay.
Yeah, Woody, when you look at that, there's a great, again, you don't have Exhibit B, that they've run the numbers of high and low turnout that has to break down everything, okay? So all that question, we have that.
Okay. So just clarity. So
Mr. Mayor, let me clarify what I said.
Okay.
In our calculations, it included the MEDAC deck.
Right.
None of the apartment complex parking was placed in the MEDAC.
No.
Just to be clear.
So the MEDAC would be for just people coming to retail, ball game, that kind of stuff.
Green jackets, all that.
Not Woody living in an apartment.
No.
Gotcha. Okay.
You'll have your
Thank you.
spot. Thank you, Woody. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody else? Oh, come on, Elsie. Well, we got 2 people coming. Ladies first. Amy, come on up.
Amy Schoenbaum, 1010 West O Street. I don't know if someone can answer this question, but on the parking deck that's closest to parcel K, there's an elevator, but it's on the stadium side. So on the side that's going to be closest to the apartments, is there going to be an opening made so people can walk across that little street to get to the apartments?
Mr. Mayor, the way they have the apartment laid out is the main entrance is on that side of the building. So they'll be able to cross the street and go in.
But there's no opening in the parking structure to get through.
Correct. And I don't know, that's a city deck. I don't know if the city's making any renovations to that deck or not. But the
Okay.
developer did place the main entrance to the apartments adjacent to the deck just for that purpose.
Are the apartment parking spaces on the ground floor since there's not an elevator on that side?
The spaces, as they're allocated, has not been designated that this space is for this and this space is for the hotel, this one's for the apartments as of yet.
It's first come, first serve.
Yes, ma'am.
So I could come home to an apartment, see that the deck is full because it's a Green Jackets game and not have a spot?
That is something that we're working through on how to designate those spots.
Okay, so I might park on the 4th floor. There's not an elevator on the side of the apartment. I have to walk to the elevator, take it 4 flights down, go across the street to get to the apartments. So that's what I'm saying, like, it's just easier to go park on Lafayette. Like, why wouldn't you park on Lafayette? Why wouldn't you park on the pond?
Am I wrong on, for parcel K, there's going to be 160 dedicated in the hotel deck?
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct. So there will be 160 dedicated in the new hotel deck. And there's also going to be 60 dedicated in the stadium deck, and then 35 on site for Lafayette as well.
But didn't he say it was first come, first serve? So it's not really dedicated?
Now, what he's saying is right now, we haven't said at that site in the parking deck, this A is given to that person. We aren't at that point. That's not.
Okay.
But they're going to know where their parking spaces are.
Okay, good. But I'm just concerned that if your parking spot's like on the 2nd floor, that it would just be easier to park on the ground level in the neighborhood.
Yeah. I can't respond. I just know a lot of people who have in parking decks, and Brooks can respond to that when they did their analysis. They're pretty aware of trends and how that works. I know that may be a concern for you, but that's not something that I think is going to be a big issue as you may think.
Well, just as a little background, I moved here from Los Angeles, so I'm very familiar with traffic and parking.
Sure.
And actually, Los Angeles's rule for apartments is dedicating 1.5 parking spots per unit. It's high density. However, it has to be on site. It's not a separate parking deck. So it's kind of interesting that this is actually, to me, LA has a better parking situation than this, which is hard to fathom. But like the apartments that are considering being planned on the river, they don't even have a deck near them. Like the garage is by the stadium, right? So if they had groceries or something, they'd have to walk all that way.
Yeah.
G&H will have their own actual spots. They're 64 for on-street residents. So that one actually is a little bit more on-site for them.
All right.
And what I would suggest is, pull up that master parking agreement and look at that.
I have a really
has
good
it has it
Excel
all
version
on
if you
there.
wanted that I made for myself if you like it.
It is. I guess I just want the council to realize how dense it is. Like we're talking about one of the most populated cities in the country being the same density.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Where's the gentleman that was just, you're hiding from me. How you doing?
My name's Steve Cover, 444 Arrington in North Augusta. And Amy spoke about a number of things that I was going to, so I won't recap those, but I would like to just say the word dedicated makes me nervous because I have yet to hear somebody say for sure that we're going to put up 160 signs that says these are for the apartment parking spots in that, because every time we talk through this, well, they're first come, first serve. Well, if they're first come, first serve for the 160 spots assigned to the apartment complex, then I think that's a good plan. If there's 160 spots in there, like Amy just spoke about, 160 people from the stadium could park in those spots and not get ticketed for it, then that becomes a problem because that's when the parking is going to be pulled out into other spaces. So it all goes back to, and everybody said it, active management. And we need to get there. I've been a proponent of SRP Park and this from the very beginning. I knew it was going to be there when I had my house built. So I've been excited about getting this built out to something that's going to be wonderful for North Augusta. But we need to actively manage it, and we need City Council to work towards that so that we don't continue to have this problem. A pedestrian's going to get hit down there. We're not protecting how people are parking. You're parking when opposing traffic. People flip on their lights at night. When pedestrians walk out, you can't see them. So somebody's going to get hurt in that downtown area if we don't do something in actively management. And that's what I'm asking you to do.
Yep. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Public comments? Okay. Any council discussion?
I'll just add on to the parking. On our previous master parking agreement, we did not have dedicated spots labeled correct.
So Councilman, just to, and if Brooks or Tommy can go ahead and jump in if I get a foul field here, just so I'm not setting false expectations. You should not expect to drive into the hotel deck that's owned by the city and see a sign that says, parcel K parking only. Like that's not the model that was presented through the parking agreement. There are X number of spots that are allocated for the parcel K, but you will not go into the hotel deck, at least based on the agreement that we have, to go up there and see that this one space is always my space. If I live in apartment 835, that I'm going to drive right to this one spot every time. That's not what the model is for the parking.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council discussion? Okay.
Go ahead, David. We're here to approve the general development plan, the changes in the development plan.
Yep.
And just quickly, I moved in there in 2007. I remember the first house in 2006. This project was brought to the table with the stadium in 2013. We've seen so many things happen in that period of time. All the things that we thought would happen. I was living on a street where there was 4 houses, and Manuel's restaurant wasn't even open. But when it opened, wow, the first time I had to deal with is not being able to park in front of my house. And we got used to it. And everything grew and grew and grew. And then the stadium came in place. And we watched all that happen. We've had issues with parking along the way. I feel that most of them have all been addressed along the way. But we've also had a property that we haven't been able to develop because we had some hiccups back in 2016, 2017. And then after that, we had some health issues across the country. So here we are wanting to continue our project for the best economic benefit for the city that we've seen in a very, very, very long time. And we're debating it to every little T. When I think that we have some experts that have worked very hard to come up with a plan that would work for us, work for our community, work for everybody that lives there. So I'm in favor for this. And I think that we just need to be able to give an opportunity for this to happen, for it to work. Because we have people that know how to do this. We have people that work in this industry. And it's about time we get phase 2 complete of our development.
Anybody else, council discussion? Ms. Pat?
Well, not a discussion, just some statements. Where'd Amy go to show? There she is. I like what you say, you young lady of knowledge. And I'm just going to tell a quick little story. Years ago at North Augusta Elementary, when I worked there, the traffic was awful. I hate to tell you this, we were cussed at, we were everything else. So, and I am not a traffic engineer, but I went out and literally studied the traffic for months till we come up with a system. Now, did it work the first few months? Nope. We were still being chewed out. But after we got our parents oriented to what we were doing, you have your name in your car, you stay in this lane, you go around, it's all over the school system now. And even your private daycares. But y'all are right. The city has overlooked this problem. That, we should have been more on the ball with, painting the lines. Why are we waiting till now to do all this? But we are. And like I said, as a council, we live and learn. I told somebody today, when I voted 25 years ago, I thought, my God, are you crazy, Pat? I got to fit today's time. And as Brian, I think he left, didn't he? Mr. Brittenham, the young man that spoke. Yeah, well, one thing, and I would say this to you, young man, he said do parking like free for 3 months to get people's mind. This is where it's going to be. I don't know if they do it free, but do it. And like the Weston said, I think it should be designated some way that people know. You might get a ticket if you're not a resident of this apartment and you're parking here. We have got to come in there and do that. I mean, and everybody on this council knows I'm against parking meters. I think that was the dumbest thing we ever did, put in them parking meters. Okay, because they don't work half the time. People, you get there and you get flustered. You're trying to get to the game. You can't get to the game because you're trying to get your car to take the meter. So, yes, but I think this is something as council, with our police, with our city administrator, assistant, this is a problem we can jump on and help solve to make life better. I go to Beck Park all the time, and I do park in front of those houses, and I, just hope they don't get mad at me. But it's just such a beautiful place. And the thing I love about Hammond's Ferry, it's different. Every house is not a cookie cutter. You can have a mansion, you can have a smaller one. And I told my daughter yesterday, I said, that is what's special about Hammond's Ferry. And we want to see that it's single, right out of college kids can live there till they build their income and can buy them a nice house. But like I said, it is our duty that we see that your parking spaces are not taken. And if we don't, then you hold us accountable. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted the gentleman right here, you were talking about the police doing ticketing, and we haven't done anything. Actually, that's not true. We did vote to change, to take that and put it under code enforcement from public safety. What was that, 6-8?
Somebody on there.
Yeah, and we are ramping up. We did put a new code enforcement officer. I've had some conversations with Mr. Paradise because that's been my biggest concern moving forward was the enforcing of the parking. It's been a problem for some time. I don't disagree. And I've had conversations with Mr. Clifford, Mr. Paradise about that. So we are gearing up to handle that. What that looks like, we don't know yet, but we have had talks about it. The other thing too, I tried to do my homework today. I called as many people from Hammonds Ferry, Steve, I didn't get a chance to call you or Stetson or Diane, Randy. I talked to about 15 people that I know that live down there. And everybody, for the most part that I talked to, they're okay with the development, but they're having the same concerns y'all are. Parking enforcement and possibly traffic after a ball game. Now, I mean, those are things we could probably do in-house. If you've ever been to Atlanta and you go to a Falcons game or Atlanta United, or you go to Carolina, Georgia, wherever, when you leave those parking decks or you leave those parking areas, you don't get to go the way you want to. They funnel you out one way. Maybe we could look at doing something like that. I mean, there are ideas. On event nights, we have spoken about running the trolleys back and forth. A lot of people will park on West Avenue. Don't believe me? Come watch a game. People will park on West Avenue, walk down the hill. So, I mean, we are looking at it. It's not all set in stone yet. It can still change. But we are looking at different ways of doing that to try to alleviate some of that stuff. But, I agree, like Ms. Pat said, and I've had this conversation. I mean, we need to start with enforcement. That has been an issue for a while in Riverside Village. I know some of the folks at Hammonds Ferry say, you're starting to see people parking closer to the ponds and stuff during game nights. And I think some of it is just getting people used to the fact that, hey, you're going to have to park here. If you go to Greenville, you go to Savannah, you go to Charleston, you don't own street park. You basically, you park in a parking garage, you walk a couple of blocks. That's any developing city. I mean, yeah, North Augusta is not quite as big. I mean, but even if you go to downtown Augusta, that's got all the parking you want. Go down there on Friday or Saturday night. Unless you see someone pulling out, you're probably parking a block or two away. I like to go to Soleil. It's on the corner of, I believe it's 10th or 11th. And a lot of times I'm parking on 10th and Reynolds just to get close enough and have to walk 2 blocks. So, I mean, some of it is, this is changing. And I know a lot of people are against apartments versus condos. I think the word apartment scares people because growing up here, when we heard apartments, we were thinking about these standalone units. And we've seen what's happened to a lot of them. Some of them are still nice. But the fact of the matter is, this is not, a bunch of drinking buddies out of high school that are going to be able to afford this. These are young professionals, and that should help keep the value up, in my opinion. There's not really a roadmap, but there are other cities that have this, Brooks. I know y'all have done some, and I'm sure the values of that many years later is still up. Do I know what's going to happen 30, 40 years from now? Absolutely not. The other thing, too, since I've been on council, this has been an issue, getting this developed. And, we had COVID. Yeah, can't use that as an excuse anymore, but I do understand the market has changed. I know there's a lot of people saying, well, it's supposed to be office space. Well, we just can't rent it. We have a captive audience now. We have some people who are willing to work with us to see our vision, but they've got to make money too. The worst thing could happen if we don't pass this. Who wants a tax increase? Because it could fail. And so we've got a captive audience. Is it perfect? I don't think so, but it's better than anything else that we've seen in the last, I've been on council 5 years now. This is the best thing we've seen. Are there going to be some problems? Sure. But us as a council, the mayor, our staff, we have strong staff members that are able to, look at all this. We will look at it, and we will figure out what's best for everybody. And I know, like I say, I talked to about 15 people today in Hammonds Ferry. I've already spoke to Chief about, I know people say speeding. Hopefully we'll be able to put the little speed trap machine down there. It worked great in my neighborhood. Hopefully it'll work great down there. And again, game nights, maybe we can just funnel some, people out the way they came in, and then that would hopefully help the traffic in Hammonds Ferry too. But, we are aware of all the stuff that could happen potentially. But we are working towards it because the last thing we can do is let this fail. This is a great place for people of all ages. A lot of, and demographics have changed too. A lot of young kids, they don't want a house with a picket fence. They want to live in apartments. You ask my daughter who's down in Savannah. Dad, I'm going to stay in Savannah. I've already found an apartment for the summer. She don't want a house. A lot of young kids are doing that. And plus, a lot of the young kids coming out cannot afford a house. Interest rates are too high. And also the housing value, especially around this area. I mean, many of y'all know Hammonds Ferry, River Club. I mean, these housing values have skyrocketed. So it is a couple of things, but yes, we are aware of all the what could be's, but I think not to pass this would hurt us way more than it would to try to work out the few things that we have.
Any other council discussion?
Well, as you challenge them not to say stuff that's already been said, I won't repeat a lot of the stuff that's already been said, but I do want to say, y'all are right. We have not enforced parking down there as we should. And I'd love to be able to look out into the audience and say, hey, trust us, we're going to get it right this time. But I've got to look at us and say, we've got to get it right this time. I do agree with Eric that, to me, where I'm at with it right now, is I feel like the risk of not moving forward with what we have that is an alteration from what the original vision of Hammond's Ferry was. It's still within the context of what that development was supposed to be. If I could snap my fingers and bring a little more retail and a little more restaurants and some viable office space down there, I mean, that would be my preference. But I don't think that's viable right now. I think this is what's viable in the market. I do think it is a good solution. It allows us to move forward with a partner that has a proof of concept that, quite frankly, I feel a whole lot better about moving forward with. And I think the questions out there are answerable and solvable, but I'm looking at us, have to be committed to solving those. And the proof is going to be in the pudding. I agree with what Mr. Schuler said. I mean, parking is an issue, although I know I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say I don't think people are going to park in Hammond's. We'll have to deal with that and figure out a way to mitigate it. I do think there's a risk of all of that happening, but I agree with Mr. Schuler. I think the bigger issue is when they start moving, where that risk goes and how we manage that. And again, I do think there are answers to that. We discussed many of those answers, and we have to be not only committed to putting the energy, but the resources behind answering those. And I know that doesn't give you a whole lot of comfort, and I acknowledge that. But I sincerely feel like the risk of not moving forward to the taxpayers and to the model of that program, and the fact that I feel like this is moving generally in the right direction as it should be built out. To me, that there's just too much risk overall in us not doing that. So again, I wish that I could look you in the eyes and say, hey, we got this parking thing figured out. And the reality is we don't. But I do think we've got the folks in place that can, and we've got to be committed. We've got to not only hold one another accountable, but be held accountable to ensure that we're putting those things in place to make it work. That's.
Agreed, Kevin. Good job.
Let me say, Sean, Woody, Amy, Steve, I will tell you, 3 years I've been on this council, I think everyone here has told you that we have not done what needed to be done with enforcement. I mean, if you haven't heard that, okay, I'm telling you. If you haven't heard it, you haven't been listening. We've said that. What I will tell you is this is the first time, except for Diane, come to a public power hour, okay, that we have collectively heard you and staff has heard you that what we've done in the past won't work, and we know that. And I hate that it's a catalyst of this project B of us going through to make that happen, but guess what? It has to happen now. We have to enforce it. We have to come up with those reasons. Because it won't work if we don't. So that's for you to hold us accountable while we do that process. But what I'm telling you is we collectively hadn't had this conversation before. And for a lot of different reasons, we've kicked the can. We're not kicking anymore. And we will figure it out. We have the experts to do it, and we will make it happen. It may not be perfect, but we are committed to making this project work, and we know parking enforcement is a part of that. So that being said, if there's no other conversation, I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous for that motion. Thank you. Okay. Item 7. Ordinance number 2024-07, abandoning a road right-of-way shown as Warniger Run on a plat for Hammond's Ferry Ballpark Village, Phase B in the city of North Augusta. Do I have a motion to approve this ordinance on first reading?
Second.
Was that Mr. McGee was first? Okay, second. Mr. President, thank you. Should be an easy one. Anything you want to say about this, Mr. Clifford?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is a required action where this is a city-owned road. This is not an SCDOT road. And this is an L-shaped roadway that bisects parcels G and H. As we talked about in the general development plan, the original plan was for H parcels and then having a median there, but the new plan has that as basically one facility on both G and H combined. And so in order to make that building work, the developer needs access to that road to basically build on top of it or to add that for parking. So ultimately, there's no cost to the city as far as from a development perspective on this road, but we do have to release that right away and abandon the road to the developer for them to be able to move forward on parcels G and H. Again, this is a staff recommendation for approval, and I turn it back to you.
Any citizen comments? Any council discussion? Here now, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Item 8, Planning and Development Ordinance Number 2024-08, authorizing and approving the execution delivery of a Fourth Amendment to Master Development Agreement and the Development Inducement Agreement and other matters relating thereto. Do we have a motion to approve this ordinance on first reading? Mr. President, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. McGee, thank you. Okay, Mr. Clifford and Joe.
So I'm going to defer most comments to Mr. Joe Lucas, our attorney from Pope Flynn, who's an expert on such matters. But just as a reminder for the council and for our citizens, we had an original MDA that has now been extended 3 times. So the original terms of the MDA were extended for 2 one-year extensions each. And then most recently, a 60-day extension to give staff and attorneys and advisors and developers time to come to this new 4th MDA. And the reason why we had a public hearing earlier today is to consider this because it's a major modification to the MDA. So we're not copy and pasting the terms of the previous MDAs. This is a new set of terms associated with this MDA. And Joe is going to talk through that in a little bit. I would like to address one of the comments from Mr. Corbett about the financial aspect of this. And so you look at the total financials and it comes out to, about $1.45 million. The $450,000 is economic inducement as rebates for fees associated with land disturbance permits, water tap fees, or sewer tap fees, and things associated with construction. So that's not money that we have currently. And so as we receive that money, if this project goes forward with council approval, that the developer is still on the hook to pay those initial fees, and that those fees will be in receipt by the city and essentially put in escrow, if you will, for a period of time. And then once they meet the conditions of the economic development inducement, that those funds will be released back to the developer. So then that takes it down to $1 million, which is spread out over a period of time. And as we've talked about through council meetings in the past and study sessions, the council has made actions to essentially gather extra reserves in the Riverfront Central Core Fund based on contingency of not knowing if taxes are going to be paid year to year. And so we have money that's set aside for future bond payments if it was required. If this developer moves forward with this project, and again, Joe will talk through this more artfully than I will, ultimately, the mid payments and the taxes will still be required to be paid between now and the completion of the project. And so these rebates will be contingent upon completion of work spread over multiple years, spread out over multiple projects. And so the city has the fiscal ability to withstand that cost. It will not have any effect on the general fund budget year to year, aside from the fact that Riverfront Central Core dollars are in play, which are considered general fund as well, but not the annual general fund budget. And so there is no risk going forward that if this development happens, that we have to tie into either a capital projects fund or into the general fund, which is where citizens pay their property tax to. So ultimately, there's no taxpayer burden associated with their property taxes associated with these economic development inducements. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. I appreciate that. Mayor and Council, I'm going to hit the highlights of the ordinance, and the two attachments, which are the Fourth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement and the Development Inducement Agreement. And so as I go through those, you're welcome to stop me with questions. Again, this is sort of an overview, but happy to dive in on any particular part that you'd like. So the Ordinance 2024-08 approves a Fourth Amendment to Master Development Agreement and Development Inducement Agreement. It opens with about almost 5 pages of findings of fact. And what has happened, that's essentially a rehash of what we have all done to get to this place. So first, the items 1 through 5 are some history of the development that a lot of us know, but we've described that there. Items 6 through 14 describe the current status of the development and the plan for moving forward with the 6 vacant parcels, including the introduction of South City Partners as a new joint venture partner for the master developer Greenstone, which I'll touch on in a minute in terms of the importance there. Modifications to the master plan by amending the master development agreement and the developer's request for financial incentive grants to induce the development of the last remaining parcels. Items 15 through 19 are the key findings. 15 in particular lists 9 specific items that benefit the city. Again, the city has done a good bit of homework here. Jim talked about talking to officials and management in places in Georgia, Alpharetta, and Kennesaw in particular, where South City has done work. The importance of South City joining the team is that I'm not sure we would go forward with this if they weren't. A couple of you have cited the long history with Greenstone, and a fresh, new approach has been brought to the table here, so that's critical. So the items 15 through 19 lay out those benefits and why we want to make the incentive grants and how this is going to catalyze the completion of Riverside Village. So section 2 is a critical section. There's a line of cases in South Carolina. The Supreme Court has looked at economic development in different ways through the years, grants, bonds, other means of incentivizing development. And the court has looks at public purpose. That's what they want to find. And they take a broad view of what public purpose is. I think our list of 9 items and then other items in 16 and 17 of the findings really lay out how important this is to the city and how much benefit the city achieves. But the other thing is the Supreme Court has given great weight to legislative determinations, meaning the legislature of North Augusta, which is your body. The test that they apply in looking at this is called the Byrd test. It's an overruled case from 1984, but they picked up the test out of that and applied it in several cases, including Nichols versus South Carolina Research Authority and the WDW property case from year 2000. And the test asked the following 4 questions, and this is what the ordinance lays out. Number 1, what's the ultimate goal or benefit to the public intended by the project? Number 2, are public or private parties the primary beneficiaries? In this case, we've come down on the side of the public. Obviously, the developer gets a benefit, but the public benefit here is much greater. Number 3, is the benefit to the public speculative? Answer is no. Mr. Clifford's already hit on it. There are some specific conditions built into this agreement that South City has to do what they say they're going to do, deliver the projects before they are entitled to any payment from the city. And number 4, what's the probability that public interest will be served and to what degree? Again, the overarching view here is that a public purpose is served by proceeding with this project by making these grants. And the ordinance sets all that out. I'm happy to answer questions around that. Section 3 of the ordinance approves the Development Inducement Agreement and the Fourth Amendment to the Master Development Agreement. And again, Mr. Clifford mentioned earlier, the parties to these documents are the current owners and the master developer. And while optically, that's one thing to worry about, right, with Greenstone, the South City folks are the ones we're going to be dealing with. South City has a contract to buy those parcels, C, G, H, and K. They intend to execute on that contract after assuming council approval. And so it's the reliance on South City partners that's the key here. Section 4 of the ordinance talks about the method of paying the grants. So state law requires that if the city council is going to make grants to developers, they've got to do it through the normal budgeting process. They've got to appropriate the funds. So as Jim mentioned, the central Riverfront Central Core is the place where we're going to point to for the funds, but the city's actually got to plug in grants into the budget process. I'll talk about timing of that in a minute. But again, no grants can be paid unless the city goes through the ordinary budget process to get those paid. And the remainder of the ordinance is sort of the general boilerplate items, ratifying prior acts, referencing the public hearing, severability, repealer, those types of things. So I'm happy to, before I jump into the Fourth Amendment, which is the first attachment, happy to answer questions. If any.
Good. Go ahead.
Okay. So Jim mentioned there have been 3 prior amendments to the Master Development Agreement. All 3 have merely been term extensions, minor modifications, just stretching the agreement out. Here, we're doing much more, and it's tying in with the General Development Plan revisions that Planning Commission recommended and that you've just approved via first reading 2024-06. So there's some recitals laid out in the Fourth Amendment that give the history of the Master Development Agreement and the purposes of the Fourth Amendment. Article 1 of the Fourth Amendment extends the term from the expiration that would have happened back on March 15th, but we extended by 60 days. So it extends it out through March 15, 2028, essentially a 4-year extension. That builds in the time necessary. We've negotiated this with the South City team. That builds in the time necessary to get these projects done. Article 2 revises the master plan with respect to parcels C, D, G, H, I, and K, which we'll call the Phase B parcels. And it amends the definition of general development plan to pick up the new ordinance and the new revisions to the general development plan. Article 3 specifically calls out the status of all the projects down the hill. So it lays out, it identifies the projects that are complete, and then it identifies the changes to the projects that have not been completed. Article 4 revises and replaces certain exhibits to the Master Development Agreement, including the Master Plan, the General Development Plan, and a parking agreement summary. Again, all of this is working in concert. The mayor mentioned the parking agreement that was amended and restated and approved on March 18th. Article 5 cross-references the Development Inducement Agreement and incorporates it into the Fourth Amendment. And it confirms that the grants are subject to appropriation by the city. And Article 6 is an important piece of the Fourth Amendment. So it provides, number 1, the conditions to effectiveness of the Fourth Amendment. Before it goes into effect, the city has to have approved Ordinance 2024-06, and all taxes that are due or may be outstanding on the Phase B parcels all have to be paid. It also, Article 6 also provides for the continuing effectiveness of the agreement. So in other words, for this agreement to remain in effect going forward, the owners of the Phase B parcels, so again, for the South City entity acquiring C, G, H, and K, they have to remain timely with all their mid payments and all their taxes as we go forward. So at any point, if they fail to make mid payments or taxes, the city has the right, it's not automatic, but the city has the right to terminate the Fourth Amendment or terminate the Development Inducement Agreement, the grant agreement. That would be in the city's sole discretion if they fail to make their tax and mid payments. So to Jim's point earlier, one key here is that the payments are going to continue as we go along. We're not stopping payments. We're not, abating taxes or mids. The balance of the Fourth Amendment includes miscellaneous legal provisions and exhibits. And happy to answer any questions on that.
Good.
Okay.
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
But if they're late, do we have a time? Let's say they're due
Yes,
April 15th and they want to pay them May 1st.
So that's why I emphasize the city has the right to terminate, but they don't automatically terminate. So if they're late, but we're in negotiations with them or we're discussing things, the city can be flexible on that. But it's the city's call, not theirs. Yep. Okay, so development inducement agreement, again, this is the key of the grant arrangement. Once again, there are a series of recitals at the beginning of the agreement that lay out the development history, the current status of the projects, and the purposes of these grants. In a similar way that the ordinance itself does. Some of the stuff is repetitive, but again, we want to make sure as a standalone document, somebody later reading it understands that. The first section of the development inducement agreement provides the developer's agreement to construct the Phase B projects on the Phase B parcels as shown in the revised general development plan and the master plan, and has the developers agreeing to hire necessary construction, design, and engineering professionals and use proper standards of care and diligence in completing the projects. The second section is the meat of the grants in two different pieces, as Jim described earlier. First are grants relating to certain fees. Those are on a per parcel basis, CGH, CDGHINK, and they equate to the actual amounts of land disturbance permits, building permits, and sewer tap fees paid with respect to each of the parcels. So while you see $450,000 in there, you also see specific amounts per parcel that, when added up, add to the 450. That's a cap. That's an absolute cap that the city will never have to exceed. But the actual amounts of the grants are going to be whatever the actual amount of money is the developers pay in with respect to each parcel. And as Jim said, that money will come in, it will be set aside, and await satisfaction of the conditions. The conditions include delivering a certificate of occupancy for all improvements on any of the parcels, and if there's retail that's planned on that parcel, written proof of debt or equity funding for up to $60 per square foot of retail improvements. I mentioned the cap. There's a cap of $450 for all of them, a per parcel cap that's in the agreement. And all grants, as we talked about earlier, are subject to appropriation. So again, even if they deliver on all of this, it's still going to be up to the city to stick the grant in the budget, approve it, and pay it out. It'll be incumbent on the developer as they approach delivering the CO and the proof of the retail improvements that they make the request to the city for the grant. Okay, so that's the first set of grants. The second set of grants is the $1 million Jim mentioned earlier, and that essentially equates to, but is not tied directly to, 2 years' worth of mid payments on parcels C and K. Parcels C and K on an annual basis are about $500,000 in mid payments. And so in our early discussions, the idea was to try to rebate or refund mid payments, but we're not going to do that. All we're agreeing to do is make an economic development grant out of funds down the road. As Jim said, funds are already in place that can handle this, but in addition, mid payments and taxes get paid along the way. So more funds will be coming in, and actually, unless funds are paid in, they're essentially not going to be paid out. So it's not to exceed $1 million for these grants. It's only CGH and K we're talking about here. No additional incentive grants on D&I. They're payable in 3 consecutive annual installments of $333,333 each. The first payment is conditioned on delivery of the certificate of occupancy and the retail proof that we talked about earlier on parcels C and K. They've got to do that by December 31, 2027, or the obligation to pay goes away. And once the obligation to pay the first payment goes away, the second and third payments go away. So obviously, they've got a lot of incentive to deliver C and K by December 31, 2027, or no additional payments will be made. If they do meet those conditions and the first grant payment is made, the second grant payment will be due in the next fiscal year, not same year, next fiscal year. And then the third grant payment would be due in the following fiscal year, but that one is also tied to conditions. That one is conditioned on delivering the CO and the proof of retail improvements by February 15, 2028. So only several months later. I think the expectations are actually that the C and K would come earlier than that, but the G and H deadline is February 15, 2028. Failure to meet the deadline for G&H would terminate that obligation of the city to pay. Section 3 of the Development Inducement Agreement lays out certain other duties of the developers in the city, including the developer's obligation to promptly and diligently pursue Phase B projects in accordance with the commencement schedule and delivery schedule set forth in the MDA, to secure all necessary approvals and permits from governmental authorities, and to comply with all technical codes, development codes, building standards, etc. Again, very common construction type language. Section 4 is important. It actually lays out the term of the agreement, but more importantly, the default and remedies provisions. The term of the development inducement agreement is that it will remain in effect until all the projects are completed and any grants that are payable are paid. And I emphasize any, because again, they've got to hit conditions. If they fail to hit conditions on certain grants, no grant will be paid. If the developer defaults and can't cure, or if it defaults under the MDA, the city has the right to terminate, as we talked about. That's the hammer. The city has that, and of course the conditions are a significant hammer, because if they miss it, they don't get paid. If the city defaults, which would essentially just be a payment default, the city has the right to cure, but if it doesn't cure, the developer can pursue legal remedies. The balance of the agreement includes miscellaneous legal provisions. But again, happy to answer questions on any of the aforementioned documents.
Any questions for Joe? All right. Any citizen comments? Only about this. You need to come down. Don't address. You need to come down again. Okay, I know.
Amy Schoenbaum, 1010 West O Street. I was just wondering about the retail component. You said that they have to deliver on that retail component. Do you mean that they have to find a tenant? It has to be occupied?
No, thank you for. So what they have to deliver on is a cold, dark shell. That's what it's called, which means it's essentially developable or ready to be improved for tenants. And then they have to show proof that they have funding, either debt from a bank or cash or from an investor, an equity investor, of up to $60 per square foot. Typically, the way these work, tenants contribute as well. So there's the tenant allowance, which would be here the $60 per square foot, and there'd be whatever the tenant would contribute. So collectively, you're talking 100, 120, 130 a square foot to build out retail. And one reason that we, and I'll let Brooks or Jim comment on this, but one reason we sort of reached this place is that we want to make these spaces flexible for potential tenants and give us the best chance to bring in the best mix of tenants. And again, we're building all these buildings. This retail is all in other buildings. So on C, G and H, and small grocery on D. So it's all part of a larger development, and I think they have plenty of incentive to deliver. Then it'll be incumbent on them to attract the tenants and deliver leases.
I was just a little concerned because we have 2 spaces by the stadium that seem to have never been leased, and so it would be great if it was some sort of guarantee. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other citizen comments? And I just, because I don't want to, Diane, just, are you, when you talk about general, I mean, if you have, we've already voted on 2 ordinances. Is there something else about the past? I mean, I'll let you, but I mean, is there something about what we're talking about here? Okay, you can come on up.
It's in direct reference to what was said here tonight. I grew up with one of the greatest priests in the area, and his admonition to us was speak the truth in love. I'm going to try real hard with the love part. Truth won Only Jennifer and Kevin actually uttered culpability for not attending to parking concerns. Truth two, when Amy mentioned specific concerns on the practicality of parking with no elevator access in that deck, nor opening access on the current parking deck, I saw a collective deer in the headlights response from council members. And truth number three, Eric, there were 3 HOA board members here from Hammond's Ferry tonight, yet you apparently didn't call any of those 3 board members. You chose to speak to other people. Not one of the Hammond's Ferry speakers articulated anything about sub-housing. It was all about safety and parking, not concerns about quality of construction. But Mayor Williams, you have said that all board members are now aware of our concerns for meeting current and future residents' needs, and that maybe that was not done in the past. I appreciate that. We hope that concrete mitigation plans will be relayed to our HOA board members in a timely manner and in a consistent way.
Thank you, Dan. Okay. Any other citizen comments? All right. Any council discussion?
I'll just, I typed out some notes, so I'm just going to read what I wrote out so that I get it out there, whether it applies correctly or not. But this project to me is so interrelated between the financial model, the parking agreement, and the MDA. All parts of that have to be taken into consideration when getting to this point. So that's why all of these topics kind of intertwine into each other. The staff has worked really hard to get to this point, and I want to thank you for the guys for that. There's been a lot of work over months and years for us to get to this point, and I think that's why we feel positive about the future of this development. We have had some concerns that all of you have brought to us as well, and those are concerns we share with you, and we want to be sure that we do our part to make sure those concerns are heard and that we put in practices in place, as Kevin said, and hold ourselves accountable. But I just want y'all to know that this is an important one. To me, this is like the most important vote that I've done on council so far, so I did not take it lightly. And if you do have more concerns, I would love to hear from you. But overall, I think the staff mostly has done such a great job, and we appreciate you guys for all the feedback and tools that you guys have provided to us to get to this point.
All right. Anybody want
I was just going to say that.
What they want to say before we ask for a vote?
I was just going to say, typically I don't try to repeat what other council members have asked. And lots of times people don't realize that we've had several discussions on these items before we get in this room. And we have a lot of our questions and discussion happens in the study session prior to the actual council meeting. So you might see silence out of some of us and not a lot of questions because 90% of all of our questions have already been asked and answered. And we've studied, we've had several meetings to discuss this. And I want to just tell you truthfully that 90% of everything that everybody said tonight on every single one of these, every one of these members on council have been concerned with it the whole time. In every study session, every executive session that we talked about, those were brought up and we all spoke about those.
Anybody else? All right. I'm just going to, because I think it's important, I want you to know how I look at this, the perspective of risk and reward. Every investment has risk, but every investment has risk, has rewards. If you look back to 2012 when former Mayor Lark Jones and council made the announcement about Project Jackson, they knew there would be risk. Some risks they could foresee, some they could not. One is this city had never done a public-private partnership of this type ever before. Two, they had never done debt service of that amount with so many different multiple revenue sources before. Three, what would happen if the developer had delays in building the parcels that were planned? One of the city's strategies was the mid-fees. We talked about that. Now, COVID, David mentioned, was an unknown risk. But even with the known risk and unknown risks, Mayor Jones and council saw the reward of a completed Riverside Village as being greater than the risk that was talked about. Because what they saw was improve the quality of life by citizens by having a live, work, and play community on the river that everyone could enjoy. Now, for the parcels which have been completed, now think about this: Crown Plaza, Ironwood Apartments, SRP Park with the restaurants and the retail, as well as the parking decks. All of those have been successful, and our community has been rewarded because of that happening. It has. Now, let's fast forward 3 years ago. Myself and this council, we inherited an uncompleted Riverside Village along with all the risks that came with it. And we have seen challenges, but we've been fortunate that the TIF revenue has exceeded its projection. We have been very prudent, put in hospitality tax and accommodation tax into the River Corps Fund to build up our reserves, and the mid fees have been paid on the undeveloped parcels. However, it is not realistic that we're going to continue indefinitely to service the bond debt without this project being completed. That's just plain and simple. The goal since the original MDA was signed in 2017 was to have a completed Riverside Village. And we mentioned the MDA for catalyst for growth and development, increased tourism, enhanced quality of life. And having it completed would service the debt to our bondholders as well. Nothing has changed since 2017. Those are still the things we're trying to achieve. When I ran for mayor in 2021, one of the biggest questions and comments social media was, what would I do as mayor to get this project moving again since Greenstone appeared to be unable to finish the project? You remember, Dave? Y'all remember? I'll remember that. Okay? We want to continue to improve the quality of life for citizens by having an active Riverside Village. Let me go back. So citizens' main concern was what would happen if so completed by citizens would not be impacted negatively if we did not get it built out. It's just interesting. I never got a question about traffic. I never got a question about apartments. Was Britain, what is your council going to do to get Riverside completed and find the developer that will make it happen? Now, I appreciate the concerns. I didn't make it very clear to Diane, but I don't know how more times we can say on that. But the biggest concern that weighs me as mayor, and I'm not going to speak for council, but I guess they think so, is how do we get this project completed? We want to continue to improve the quality of life of citizens by having an active Riverside Village where people are going to ball games, walking, listening to music at the amphitheater, using the boat dock, going to restaurants, shopping. Just seeing the activity yesterday as we were greeting the Augusta National Ladies playing the women amateur, it was so active down at Riverside Village and alive. We want more of that activity. So as we sit here today, we literally are in the best position to get Riverside completed since before COVID. There are still risks, but as we explained, we are doing things in the MDA to give us leverage to hold the developer accountable. Also, we're dealing with South City now. They are the majority owner of the parcels, okay? And we've already talked about what they bring to the table. So finally, I'll just end it with this. In a perfect world, we would not be here tonight. We would have had this completed several years ago. But what could have happened and should have happened is in the past. I believe, and I think this council believes, that the reward for approving this new MDA is still greater than the risk of not approving it. Having a completed Riverside Village still is the goal since 2012. It hasn't changed. That entire complex is designed to be a live, work, and play community. It just so happens to be next to Hammond's Ferry, but it is a separate entity. And this will allow us to get it completed for the first time. At the end of the day, that was what our charge was. I think we're accomplishing that. So with that being said, all in favor? That is unanimous. All right. Item 9, plan development. Resolution number 2024-07, accepting deed of dedication for the sanitary sewer and fire suppression system and associated easements and rights of way, along with a maintenance guarantee and letter of credit for Village Square Townhomes. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
All right, calm down. I lost my pen. All right, Mr. Presnell, who was second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Buck, thank you. Anything you want to share about this, Ms. Clifford?
Mr. Mayor, to orient the council and our citizens, this is for the development that's directly behind the Holiday Inn Express at Exit 5. I actually took a drive out there late last week, and they're going vertical with their very first structure, so that's good progress. And this is a standard deed dedication that we receive for projects to the city, and our staff recommendation is to approve it.
Any citizen comments? Any citizen comments? Okay. Any council discussion? All right, here now, ask for a vote. All in favor? Okay, stand approved. Thank you. All right. Item 10. This is exciting. Resolution number 2024-13, accepting donation of an adaptive kayak launcher addition to Beck Park dock from the Georgia Rehabilitation Institute. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution? All right, Ms. Carpenter, a second. All right, Mr. Wisnell, thank you. Anyone want to share about this, Ms. Clifford?
I have no major updates, Mr. Mayor. Rick Meyer from our Parks and Rec Department did a good job of showing some of the visuals associated with this adaptive kayak launch. And so the Parks and Rec Department is requesting your consideration in this matter.
Okay. Any citizen comments? Any council discussion?
I just want to say one thing. I've already told a couple of people about this. They are excited. Whether they're disabled or not, even the common person can come down there and use it. And I think that's a huge addition. Maybe in a few years, if it takes off, we could look at our boat ramp dock and then our new dock for the same thing. Because I believe kayaking and canoeing or whatever has gotten a lot bigger. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this works, and hopefully maybe we can expand on that in the future.
Pat, why don't you say what you said about how Miracle Field's opening up door? I think it's important.
Oh, yeah, I said that last week. The Miracle Field, which is hopefully by the end of April, will be completed, not completed, phase 1, that we can do, but this has also opened the door, because this organization that donated to the Miracle League Field. So I'm excited because our citizens of every walk will have something to do in this city.
All right. No other discussion. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Any administrative reports, Ms. Clifford?
Just a reminder for council, there will be no study session next week during Masters Week, and then your next formal get-together will be April 15th for our city council meeting.
Yep. All right. Is there, item 12, presentation, communication, recognition of visitors. This time where citizens may speak to mayor and council regarding any matters not listed on the agenda. Anybody got anything? Okay. That's right. That's not on the agenda, yeah. So national, let me end it with, just to let y'all know, and I really hate everybody left because everybody needs to know that. So please put the National Day of Prayer. Huh? Oh, they see you didn't have anything. Yeah, this is for non-agenda items. That's why we opened up all those other times. No one did anything.
Well, it's not on here because I brought it up. Now you said that questions would be answered and addressed, and I was trying to figure out which one of those 3 items it would have been applicable for y'all to address my concern of not having all of the properties built out. And nobody addressed those. And I think I made a specific recommendation that maybe we tack that on there to where they all came out at the same time by having an amendment there. And nobody spoke about that. So
it's coming out.
Yeah, I'm not. I think.
I can speak to that if you like, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, is there anything we're missing?
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
So in our negotiation with South City, their financing package is going to go forward for the 4 parcels that are under debate. That's C, K, G, and H. And the timelines associated with these parcels and for the economic development inducement is listed there in the MDA. Parcels D and I are slated to be acquired by South City Partners, but they could not work the same financing package and did not intend to do so. What I would tell you to maybe not allay your concern, but at least address it, which is if there are any changes in uses to the general development agreement, if for example, if you were concerned and said, hey, parcel I is supposed to have your townhomes or condos, and now they're doing apartments, that can't happen without a formal council action where they have to amend the general development plan. It gets back into public debate, goes back to planning commission. And again, I can't speak to what's going to end up at parcel I. I think, my concern when I look at D, is that it's a tight lot. And it's going to be hard for them to build there, but we'll figure out what that looks like. But from a tax perspective, if CK, G, and H are built out, that provides us the debt service funding that's going to be required. And if they choose not to build anything at all, or the city doesn't agree with I or D and they can't come to terms on that, that will not affect the debt service for the city. And so they may choose to build on it, they may not choose to build on it. I can't imagine that they wouldn't want to build on it, but I don't think that the city is going to be in a leverage position or a negative position to say, okay, well, we have to do this because if they don't build here, we're not going to meet our debt service. Did that answer that?
I apologize for
That's okay.
being on the agenda.
We got the answer. Okay. Best we can give you. I mean, I don't know how else to answer it.
Oh, I mean, what's done is done.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so we'll end this on positive because on May the 2nd is National Day of Prayer. And it's going to be at Second Providence Church. They're hosting the new fellowship hall. And what I'm really excited about is that we have 5 entranceways in North Augusta, 5 gateways. Exit 1, Exit 5, Exit 6, Highland Springs, Jefferson, Aiken, Augusta Highway, and 13th Street Bridge. We have a church in each of one of those circles that are going to spearhead a prayer walk. So for the city of North Augusta, for the first time that I know of, on the National Day of Prayer, all the churches that want to participate in citizens in whatever circle, whether you go to church in a circle or you live in a circle, we are going to have a continuous prayer walk throughout the city of North Augusta. And I just think we can talk about a lot of things here, but at the end of the day, for the Christian community, prayer is what's going to make this community what it needs to be. And so we'll get more information out about it, but just put May the 2nd for the breakfast, and then that night there'll be more information for the actual prayer walk. So anyway, just very, very excited about that, and for Second Providence to step up and host that for us in the new facility. So with that, thank you folks for staying the whole time. Proud of you. We can't give you anything, but thank you, and we stand adjourned.